In the summer of 2003, Julia Simmons, a 28-year-old travel enthusiast, arrived in the Maldives for what she hoped would be a dream vacation. The Maldives, with its crystal-clear waters, vibrant coral reefs, and an abundance of marine life, had always been at the top of her travel list. For Julia, an avid snorkeler and lover of the ocean, this was an opportunity to explore one of the world's most stunning underwater landscapes. The day began perfectly. Julia and a few other tourists from her resort boarded a small boat that took them to a secluded snorkeling spot, far from the crowds. The group was guided by an experienced local named Ahmed, who had been diving in these waters for years. He assured them that the reef they were visiting was one of the most beautiful in the area, with an incredible variety of fish and coral. Julia couldn't wait to get into the water. As the boat approached the snorkeling site, Julia could see the reef below, a colorful tapestry of corals, swaying sea anemones and darting fish. The water was so clear that she could make out every detail, even from the surface. After a brief safety briefing from Ahmed, the group began to gear up. Julia double-checked her mask, snorkel, and fins, making sure everything was secure. She had snorkeled many times before, but the excitement of exploring a new reef always brought a sense of anticipation. Once in the water, Julia was immediately mesmerized. The reef was even more beautiful than she had imagined. Schools of parrotfish, angelfish, and clownfish moved gracefully among the corals, while the occasional sea turtle glided by, seemingly unbothered by the presence of humans. The underwater world was alive with color and motion, and Julia felt as though she had entered a different realm. As the group moved along the edge of the reef, Julia noticed a large, dark crevice nestled between two coral formations. It was deeper than the other nooks she had seen, and something about it piqued her curiosity. Julia knew that many marine creatures made their homes in such crevices, and she wondered what might be hiding in this one. Perhaps a shy octopus or maybe even a small reef shark. While the rest of the group continued, Julia lingered behind, drawn to the mystery of the dark crevice. She approached slowly, peering into the shadows, her heart beating a little faster with the thrill of discovery. At first, she saw nothing but darkness, but then, as her eyes adjusted, she caught a glimpse of something moving within the crevice, a large, sinuous shape that seemed to flow with the currents. It was a moray eel, a creature Julia had only seen in documentaries. Moray eels were known for their long, snake-like bodies and powerful jaws, filled with sharp teeth. They were solitary animals, often hiding in crevices and caves, waiting for unsuspecting prey to come too close. Julia knew that while these eels could be aggressive if provoked, they usually posed little threat to divers and snorkelers who kept their distance. Fascinated, Julia hovered in the water watching the eel as it moved within its lair. The creature was larger than she had expected, its body extending far back into the crevice. Its head, with its menacing eyes and wide mouth, protruded slightly from the opening. Julia wanted to get a better look, and without thinking, she reached out toward a nearby piece of coral to steady herself as she floated closer. As Julia's hand moved closer to the coral, the moray eel reacted swiftly. Mistaking her movement for the approach of a predator, or perhaps prey, it shot out of its hiding place with lightning speed. Before Julia could comprehend what was happening, the eel's powerful jaws clamped down on her outstretched arm. The pain was immediate and intense as the eel's sharp teeth sank deep into her flesh. The creature's grip was unyielding, its body thrashing in the water as it tried to pull her further into the crevice. Julia's initial shock quickly turned into panic as she realized the danger she was in. The clear, peaceful waters of the Maldives had suddenly become a scene of terror. Julia struggled against the eel's grip, desperately trying to free herself. She kicked her legs, trying to push away from the crevice. But the eel was strong, its body coiling around her arm as it attempted to drag her closer. Every movement sent waves of pain shooting through her arm, and the water around her began to cloud with blood. The other snorkelers, who were now several meters ahead, hadn't noticed Julia's distress. She was alone, trapped in a battle with a creature that seemed determined not to let her go. Julia knew she had to act quickly. If the eel succeeded in pulling her into its lair, she might not make it out. With her free hand, Julia fumbled for the small dive knife she kept strapped to her leg. Her mind raced as she tried to remember her training and the survival tips she had read about underwater encounters. She knew she had to aim for the eel's head, its most vulnerable spot. The knife felt small and inadequate in her hand, but it was her only chance. Summoning all her strength, Julia struck at the eel's head, trying to hit it in the eyes or the snout. The eel thrashed even more violently in response, but the blows seemed to have some effect. Its grip on her arm loosened slightly, and Julia took the opportunity to pull away. She kicked furiously, pushing herself back from the crevice as the eel continued to writhe in the water. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the eel released its hold on Julia's arm. She pushed herself away from the reef, blood streaming from the deep wounds in her arm. The pain was overwhelming, but adrenaline kept her moving. She had to get away from the eel and get to safety before it attacked again. With her injured arm held close to her chest, Julia swam towards the group, her movements frantic and uncoordinated. The other snorkelers, finally realizing something was wrong, turned back towards her, their faces showing shock and concern as they saw the blood in the water. Ahmed, the guide, was the first to reach her. He quickly assessed the situation, recognizing the severity of Julia's injuries. He signaled to the others to help get her out of the water and back to the boat. Julia's mind was in a haze, the pain and fear making it hard to think, but she followed Ahmed's lead, focusing on nothing but reaching the safety of the boat. The journey back to the boat was agonizingly slow. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain through Julia's body, and she could feel herself growing weaker. Ahmed and the others helped her onto the boat, where they quickly wrapped her arm in a makeshift bandage to stop the bleeding. The sight of her mangled arm, with deep puncture wounds and torn flesh, was almost too much to bear. Back on land, Julia was rushed to a nearby medical facility where doctors worked to clean and stitch her wounds. The attack had left her with deep scars, both physical and emotional. But Julia knew she had been lucky. Had the eel been more aggressive, or had she not managed to free herself, the outcome could have been far worse. It was the perfect summer day in 2015 out in Vancouver Island, British Columbia, on that offshore water as the sun beamed with its brilliant sphere, heating the ocean surface. A group of tourists on the whale-watching Oceanic Explorer were eager to see the magnificent creatures they came for. The captain, Andrew Walters, 52, had spent over 10 years at the helm. He knew the local orca population inside and out and felt confident he could treat his passengers to an experience of a lifetime. With the boat gliding across the calm waves, Andrew scanned the horizon keenly, looking for any sign of killer whales. Suddenly, a black and white blurrus, and the captain's face was aglow with what it meant. He announced to them, pointing at the orcas with as much reverential awe as a spoken voice can manage. It looked like a pod of about 6 or 7 orcas, and he told them to get their cameras ready. The 23 passengers, ranging from young families to retired couples, crammed along the railings, eyes riveted on the graceful bobbing and blowing of the whales. New additions to the list are newlyweds Emily and Jacob Sinlar, who decided to take this once-in-a-lifetime whale-watching experience as a way to spend their honeymoon. As the Oceanic Explorer approached the pod, passengers were awed by the killer whale's sheer size and power. Adults, with their big dorsal fins and powerful lean bodies, gave the impression of almost effortlessly riding the water, while the younger calves playfully romped beside them. It was then that Andrew spotted something. One of the orcas seemed to be acting strangely, this large male who did not swim in synchrony like the rest of the pod, but swam all on his own in jerky, agitated movements. The captain mumbled that it was strange, frowning. Not once had he seen a killer whale act this peculiarly. It slightly made him uneasy. He sailed on ahead, looking apprehensively at them. He suddenly turned this huge male orca and swam directly toward the Oceanic Explorer. Because they did not understand what was happening, more photographs were taken, and the passengers gazed in awe at the whale's proximity. Andrew's heart raced. He knew exactly what the orca would do. With his urgent and commanding voice, he alerted everyone to get back. He told them the whale was not right and they were too close. They needed to get away from it. However, the warning came too late. In an instant, a bone-jarring impact struck as the killer whale rammed the side of the boat, causing the vessel to shudder violently. The force knocked several crew members off balance while panicked shouts filled the air. Andrew yelled for everyone to hold on as he struggled to keep the Oceanic Explorer steady amidst the chaos. The Orca, now more furious than ever, assaulted the boat non-stop. With every hit, it slammed the boat harder than the last. The color washed out of the faces of the passengers, who were now overtaken with fear, holding on to handrails as they huddled together. An alarmed Emily was clinging to the railing with Jacob. She asked what was going on, crying and shaking her voice. The tourists thought this was supposed to be some fun trip. Jacob, his arm protective cast across his wife, could only shake his head, assuring Emma that they needed to be out there as fast as they could. Andrew, his fingers turning numb, searched his eyes for some escape. The attack had become focused, with the lone male from the pod zeroing in on his target. No longer distracted by anything else, this instinct-driven predator relentlessly rammed the Oceanic Explorer with fierce intensity, embodying the unstoppable force of a killing machine. He bellowed everyone to hold on, saying he would try to outmaneuver this whale, but he needed everyone to stay calm and do exactly as he said. There were silent nods of consent as the passengers' eyes remained baited, wide with fear of the unknown, heartbeats racing in their chests. Andrew yanked the tiller in sharp, sudden turns, his foot pressed to the floor as he desperately tried to outmaneuver the relentless Orca snapping at the boat's wake. The ship surged and plunged into massive, foaming waves, each lifting the bow wildly as the exhausted passengers fought to stay on their feet amidst the chaos. Emily clung to Jacob, her nails biting into his skin as the boat pitched and yawed. She wanted to get off the ship, but her voice was barely audible over the roar of the waves and the thundering impacts. Jacob held her as tight as he could, fear apparent in his voice. He assured Emma they needed to trust the captain, as he knew what he was doing. Time seemed to slow, as did the Oceanic Explorer and Orca, moving into a deadly ballet where every maneuver was thought to outmaneuver the other. The agitated nerves of the passengers watched in torturous silence, praying they might make it out of this ordeal alive. The Orca moved more spastically all of a sudden, and Andrew spurred on. He yelled to everyone to brace themselves and hit the throttle to the maximum. The boat roared ahead, leaving behind the crazed Orca in the wake of its path. The passengers erupted in cheers and applause. Their faces were etched with relief as the Oceanic Explorer finally drew some distance from the killer whale. Wiping his face on one sleeve, beads of sweat stinging at his eyes, Andrew finally allowed himself a small swell of triumph. Yet he knew their ordeal was far from over. The Orca did not give up the chase. His big body slammed through the waves with unnerving speed. With the speedboat going full throttle, Andrew's face became determined. Andrew muttered that they could not outrun it forever, looking for an idea. They needed to find a way to lose it. He could visualize safety from the relentless Orca somewhere across the open ocean, where they could hole up to escape it. But there was hardly any refuge, and the nearest land was miles away. Andrew's mind raced as the Oceanic Explorer sped away in desperation, the massive Orca closing the gap with terrifying speed. He frantically searched his thoughts for a solution. Anything that could shake off the relentless pursuit of the vengeful killer whale. Each second felt like an eternity as he struggled to devise a plan, knowing that the creature's powerful jaws drew ever closer. Scanning the horizon, Andrew spotted a small cove in the distance, its sheltered waters offering a potential refuge. Without hesitation, he steered the boat towards the inlet, praying they could lose the Orca and allow the passengers to catch their breath. As the Oceanic Explorer entered the cove, the crew breathed a sigh of relief. The Orca, seemingly confused by the sudden change in terrain, slowed its pursuit and began circling the mouth of the inlet. Andrew told everyone to stay calm, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He said they managed to lose the whale that relented to the waters. The passengers, their nerves frayed, tentatively began to relax, their grip on the railings loosening as the boat came to a gentle stop. Emily and Jacob embraced, their hearts finally starting to slow. That was the scariest thing they ever experienced. As the crew began to assess the damage to the Oceanic Explorer, Andrew stepped out onto the deck, his eyes fixed on the Orca still circling the cove. He shook his head, a newfound respect for the powerful creature washing over him. Turning his gaze to the passengers, Andrew couldn't help but feel deeply grateful. He was just glad they all made it out of this unscathed. He smiled reassuringly, saying it was a close call, but they were safe now, which mattered most. The passengers, their nerves slowly settling, began to nod in agreement. They had faced a harrowing encounter with a wild animal, but emerged unharmed through their captain's quick thinking and skilled maneuvering. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the sheltered cove, the Oceanic Explorer crew assessed the damage and planned their next move. For Emily and Jacob, the honeymoon adventure had taken an unexpected and terrifying turn, but in the end, they were grateful to have survived the ordeal. As the Oceanic Explorer set sail again, all the passengers looked towards the horizon with a renewed sense of wonder and appreciation for the ocean's unpredictable beauty. Florida's sun blazed over the coastline, casting brilliant reflections off the turquoise waters. It was a perfect day for adventure. A group of friends had been eagerly awaiting this trip, excited to dive into the warm ocean and explore its mysteries. Among them was Lisa, a seasoned swimmer with a deep love for the sea. Today they aimed to explore a site known for its old shipwrecks, which are rich with marine life and history. The boat ride to the wreck was filled with laughter and anticipation. The friends chatted about the diverse fish they hoped to see. The wrecks, vibrant with coral and teeming with life, offered a thrilling blend of history and nature. As the site came into view, the rusted remains of the ship contrasted sharply with the surrounding colorful corals, a testament to the ocean's power and beauty. Lisa was the first to dive in, relishing the cool water and the sensation of weightlessness. She loved being immersed in this alien world, where the weight of the surface world was left behind. The others soon joined her, each exploring different parts of the wreck. Some admired the vivid corals, while others watched schools of fish darting through the debris. Lisa, confident and comfortable in the ocean's depths, swam further from the group, drawn to a particularly intriguing section of the wreck. As she approached, a large, slow-moving shadow emerged, a giant grouper. This massive fish, over 6 feet long, blended with the underwater landscape, its dark, mottled scales reflecting the dim light. Lisa stopped a few feet from the grouper, captivated by its size and grace. Although she had seen groupers before, this one was impressive in its sheer magnitude. The fish moved deliberately, its power evident even in its calm demeanor. Lisa felt a thrill of awe mixed with caution. The grouper's awareness of her presence was evident as it circled slowly, its gaze fixed on her. Despite its serene appearance, Lisa knew the ocean was a domain of unpredictability and respect. Lisa remained still as the grouper circled her, its slow, deliberate movements heightening her sense of unease. The ocean, once comforting, now felt oppressive. She knew she needed to create distance but hesitated, caught in the moment. Without warning, the grouper changed direction. With a powerful flick of its tail, it lunged at her with unexpected speed. Lisa barely had time to react before the fish's broad head crashed into her chest, knocking the breath from her lungs and sending her reeling. Everything went dark, a blur of pain and confusion. Instinct kicked in, and Lisa kicked hard to push away from the fish. But the grouper, driven by predatory instincts, circled back. Its gaze locked onto her. The water around her churned, the once calm sea now a chaotic battlefield. Lisa's chest burned from the impact, and each breath was a struggle as she fought to regain her composure. Panic surged as the grouper charged again. This time, Lisa twisted her body, narrowly avoiding a direct hit, though the fish's massive side still clipped her, sending her spinning through the water. Her vision blurred, and she lost her sense of direction amidst the swirling bubbles and pain. She needed to reach the surface and the safety of the boat, but the grouper's speed and power made escape difficult. Her friends, recognizing the danger, swam toward her in frantic efforts to help. Lisa saw their distorted shapes through the haze of pain and panic. She reached out, her arms heavy and uncoordinated, trying to move toward them. The grouper made another pass, brushing against her as it prepared for another attack. Desperation marked every moment. Lisa's muscles screamed and her lungs burned as she fought for air. The grouper, sensing her weakness, closed in, its jaws snapping dangerously close to her leg. She kicked out, connecting with its rough skin, but her effort only seemed to provoke the grouper further. Her friends reached her just as the grouper made another pass, their hands grabbing hold of her arms, pulling her away from the fish. The water churned around them, a maelstrom of limbs and fins as they fought to escape the predator. The grouper, undeterred, lunged again, its powerful body slamming into Lisa's side. The impact sent a shockwave of pain through her, but her friends held on, their collective strength just enough to pull her out of the fish's reach. They kicked hard, propelling themselves toward the surface, the grouper following closely behind. Lisa could feel its presence, the water vibrating with the power of its movements. She focused on the light above, the shimmering surface that seemed so far away, yet so close. Every stroke was a battle, every kick a fight against the weight of the ocean and the relentless pursuit of the fish. The surface broke above them, the warmth of the sun a stark contrast to the cold fear that gripped her. Her friends hauled her onto the boat, their hands trembling from the effort. Lisa collapsed onto the deck, gasping for air, her body racked with pain. She could feel the bruises forming, the sharp sting of cuts and scrapes where the grouper's rough skin had torn at her flesh. The boat rocked gently on the waves, a calmness settling over the group as they tried to comprehend what had just happened. The grouper, its territory defended, had retreated to the depths, its massive shape disappearing into the blue. The ocean, so inviting just moments before, now seemed like a place of hidden dangers, its beauty masking the raw power that lay beneath. Lisa lay on the deck, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she tried to process the encounter. The pain in her chest was intense, each breath a reminder of the fish's power. She could still feel the impact, the force of the blow that had knocked the wind out of her and left her vulnerable to the grouper's aggression. Her body ached, her muscles sore from the struggle, but she was alive, and that was all that mattered. The friends sat in silence, the gravity of the situation sinking in. They had come seeking adventure, but the ocean had reminded them of its unpredictability, its capacity to turn a moment of wonder into a fight for survival. The wreck, once a symbol of exploration and discovery, now seemed like a warning that the sea should not be taken lightly. In November 1995, Maria Santos, a 38-year-old woman from Johannesburg, South Africa, was on a much-anticipated vacation along the coast of Gansbaai, a small fishing town known for its stunning beaches and, more ominously, its frequent sightings of great white sharks. Despite being inexperienced in the sport, Maria had always dreamed of surfing, and this trip was her opportunity to finally take on the waves. The cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean were notorious for their unpredictable currents and marine life, but Maria was eager to experience the thrill of the ocean. Gansbaai, often called the Great White Shark Capital of the world, was both a paradise and a danger zone for surfers. The waters were home to a large population of seals, the primary prey of great white sharks. The sharks often hunted in the area, making it a hotspot for shark enthusiasts and a perilous playground for surfers. Signs warning of the dangers were posted along the beach, but Maria, like many others, was determined not to let fear keep her from enjoying her vacation. On the morning of November 15th, Maria joined a group of local surfers who had invited her to experience the waves at a popular surf spot known as Danger Point. The name itself hinted at the risks involved, but Maria, buoyed by the excitement of the day and the encouragement of her new friends, paddled out with them. The sky was overcast and the waves were choppy, but for Maria, it was a perfect day to surf. Maria's enthusiasm was evident as she paddled out into the water, her surfboard bobbing in the swell. The other surfers, more experienced and familiar with the area, kept a close eye on her, offering tips and helping her navigate the waves. Maria was a large woman weighing over 200 pounds, and her size made her a more prominent figure on the water. She knew she was a novice, but she was determined to make the most of her time in the ocean. As the morning wore on, the surfers began to spread out, each seeking their own perfect wave. Maria stayed closer to the group, waiting for her chance to catch a wave that wasn't too intimidating. The water was colder than she had anticipated, but her excitement kept her warm. She paddled out a little further, eager to finally stand up on her board and ride a wave back to shore. But beneath the surface, something else was lurking. Unbeknownst to Maria, a massive great white shark had been cruising the deeper waters off Danger Point. The shark, nearly 18 feet long, was an apex predator, its senses finely tuned to detect the movements of prey. In the cold, murky waters, the shark could detect even the smallest vibrations. and the silhouette of Maria on her surfboard must have appeared like a seal, a perfect target for a hungry predator. Maria was completely unaware of the danger. She was focused on the water ahead, her heart racing as she anticipated her first big wave. The other surfers were a little distance away, giving her space to try and catch a wave on her own. For a moment, everything seemed perfect, a dream finally coming true. Suddenly, without warning, the great white shark made its move. In a flash, the shark surged from the depths, its powerful body slicing through the water with terrifying speed. Before Maria could react, the shark's massive jaws clamped down on her surfboard and her leg in a single, crushing bite. The impact was so violent that Maria was ripped from her board and pulled underwater. Panic set in as Maria struggled to comprehend what was happening. The freezing water rushed over her as the shark thrashed violently, its grip on her leg unyielding. The pain was immediate and excruciating, but her instinct to survive kicked in. She tried to free herself, kicking and flailing, but the shark's power was overwhelming. The other surfers, hearing the commotion, turned to see Maria's surfboard being dragged under, the water around it churning and turning red. Realizing what was happening, they began to paddle frantically towards her, shouting in desperation, but the distance was too great. The great white, sensing its prey's struggle, shook its massive head, trying to tear its victim free. Maria's vision blurred as she was pulled deeper into the ocean. The shark's thrashing made it impossible for her to orient herself, and the cold water sapped her strength. Every instinct in her body told her to fight, but the shark was relentless, its jaws clamped down with crushing force. The world around her became a blur of pain and fear, the water closing in as she was dragged further into the depths. Desperate, Maria reached out with her hands, trying to grab anything that could help her. She felt the smooth surface of her surfboard, now broken and useless as the shark continued its attack. Her mind raced, searching for a way to escape, but the shark's strength was overwhelming. The predator was in control, and Maria's chances of survival were slipping away with every passing second. The other surfers, despite their frantic efforts, were powerless to help. They could only watch in horror as the ocean turned red, the struggle playing out before them like a nightmare. One of the surfers managed to reach the spot where Maria had been, but by then it was too late. All that remained was the broken surfboard, floating in the bloodied water. The great white shark, satisfied with its kill, disappeared into the deep, leaving behind nothing but silence and shock. The surfers, numb with disbelief, began searching the water, hoping against hope to find some sign of Maria. But she was gone, taken by the ocean's top predator in a brutal display of nature's power. The attack sent shockwaves through the surfing community and the town of Gansby. Word spread quickly, and within hours the beach was closed, with authorities issuing warnings about the dangers of shark-infested waters. Maria's death was a tragic reminder of the risks that came with venturing into the ocean, especially in areas known for their shark populations. For those who witnessed the attack, the image of the great white shark's violent strike and the helplessness they felt would haunt them forever. The ocean, so often seen as a place of beauty and adventure, had revealed its darker side, claiming the life of a woman who had simply wanted to experience the thrill of surfing. One afternoon in 2011, Amelia Sinclair, a 32-year-old marketing executive from New York, decided it would be an exhilarating experience to cool off in the crystal-clear waters off the coast of her resort in Nassau, the Bahamas. Amelia had always loved the ocean and became enchanted with the vast array of sea life present in these tropical waters. She had just drifted off into a peaceful float when she saw a dorsal fin rising through the waves not far from her. Amelia exclaimed, looking at what seemed to be a dolphin filled with excitement. Dolphins were her favorite animals. She hoped to spot some during her vacation. She didn't hesitate but started swimming towards the fin, eager to get a closer look at the creature. The closer she got, though, the more erratic and aggressive the dolphin movements began to seem to Amelia than what she would expect. The dorsal fin also appeared much larger than that of a typical dolphin. Then a huge gray body broke the surface, showing rows of razor-sharp teeth. It was no dolphin at all, but a huge bull shark, one of the ocean's deadliest predators. Amelia's heart raced as she realized the gross mistake she had just made. Bull sharks were extremely territorial and known to be aggressive toward humans, responsible for many unprovoked attacks every year. She did realize, though, that she would get away from the shark fast. It was charging toward her with its powerful physique. Fast thinking, Amelia looked around her and saw a large driftwood floating nearby. She grabbed and held it out, fending off the shark's repeated advances with a makeshift weapon. The bull shark thrashed and circled her, its black eyes locked on its potential prey. Amelia struggled to fend off the relentless shark, her arms growing weary from the desperate effort. Just as she felt her strength fading and hope slipping away, the distant hum of a boat engine reached her ears, signaling a glimmer of rescue when she needed it most. A small charter fishing vessel had spotted the commotion and was racing toward her. The captain and his first mate began yelling and throwing a life preserver toward Amelia as the boat drew closer. She gratefully grabbed the line and they pulled her to safety just as the shark lunged in her direction. Finally, safe aboard, Amelia collapsed, shaking from adrenaline and fear of her near-death experience. The captain radioed his report to the Coast Guard, and soon, a team of marine biologists and emergency responders was on the scene. Amelia was rushed to a local hospital where doctors checked her up and treated the minor cuts and scrapes she had sustained from the shark attack. She was kept overnight for observation, much to the relief of her worried parents back home in New York, whom she got in touch with quickly to recount the harrowing ordeal. Amelia told the doctors that she could not believe she had mistaken a shark for a dolphin and thought she was going to die out there. The bull shark was much bigger and more aggressive than she had ever imagined. Amelia was grateful to the fishermen who saved her in time. The marine biologists responding to the scene were astounded that Amelia could keep the shark at bay with the driftwood that long. They commended her presence of mind and bravery in the face of such a dangerous predator. Dr. Sofia Martinez, the lead marine biologist on the scene, explained that bull sharks were among the most aggressive shark species, responsible for a disproportionately high number of attacks on humans, and that Miss Sinclair was able to hold the shark at bay for several minutes before help arrived was truly remarkable. She was very lucky to be alive. The next day, still in shock but relieved, Amelia told her story to the local authorities in the hospital. She gave a full statement, hoping that her experience would allow others to learn how dangerous it was not to recognize sharks as being different from other fish. Yet despite the psychological scarring, Amelia refused to allow the incident to destroy her love for the ocean. She pledged always to be better informed about marine life and more careful when venturing into unfamiliar waters. For the remainder of her holiday, she avoided all beaches with large numbers of sharks. Upon her return to New York, Amelia began to appreciate the power and unpredictability of apex predators in the ocean. Certainly the trauma from her encounter with the bull shark would not just disappear, but she knew she now had the appreciation that was needed all along, respect for what lay below, both in terms of wonder and danger. Like many others, Mike's morning began surrounded by the tranquil beauty of the Gulf of Mexico. With the sun barely rising, casting a warm glow over the calm waters, he felt at home on his well-worn boat. A seasoned boater and angler, Mike had spent over 2 decades fishing these waters, each trip a new adventure. Out since dawn, Mike had already enjoyed a productive day, catching several sizable fish. Yet, driven by the thrill of one last cast, he decided to try his luck again. He cast his line into the blue depths, watching it disappear beneath the surface. Minutes passed, heightening his anticipation, until suddenly his rod bent sharply and the reel spun wildly. Mike's heart raced. Something big was on the line. He braced himself, feet firmly planted on the deck, as he began reeling in the mighty creature. The struggle was intense, the rod bending under the strain and the reel whining with each powerful pull from the other end. Mike's arms burned with exertion, but he was determined to discover what he had hooked. As the creature slowly approached the surface, Mike's excitement grew. Could it be a giant grouper or a colossal shark? But when the shadowy shape finally emerged, his eyes widened in disbelief. It wasn't a fish at all, but a massive stingray, its wingspan far surpassing the length of his boat. The stingray thrashed violently, its powerful tail lashing out as it tried to escape. Mike's initial excitement turned to caution as he recognized the danger posed by the creature's venomous tail barb. It was the most giant stingray he had ever seen, and he knew he needed to handle the situation carefully to avoid a potentially deadly encounter. The stingray thrashed violently, its movements chaotic and powerful. Mike knew he had to act quickly to release it before it became more agitated. Reaching for his knife to cut the line, he was caught off guard when the stingray surged upward with explosive force. The massive creature leaped out of the water, twisting midair, and crashed into the boat with a thunderous impact. The blow rocked the vessel, knocking Mike off balance. For a brief moment, he teetered on the edge, trying to steady himself. But before he could regain his footing, he was thrown into the Gulf's cold, disorienting waters. Submerged, Mike gasped for air and struggled against the drag of his soaked clothes. As he tried to orient himself, he noticed the boat was now a few feet away, the stingray's impact propelling him further than he expected. The stingray, disoriented and aggressive from its leap and collision, began thrashing violently nearby. Mike's heart raced with fear. The stingray's venomous tail barb posed a severe threat, and he was far from immediate medical help. He had to get back to the boat quickly. The stingray was dangerously close, its erratic movement stirring the water into a dangerous whirlpool. With every ounce of strength, Mike swam toward the boat, trying to block out the chaos around him. The once calm water was now a dangerous battleground. As he swam, the strain on his body intensified, his muscles burning from the effort. Out of the corner of his eye, Mike saw the stingray's tail whip toward him. He twisted narrowly to avoid the venomous barb slicing through the water. Adrenaline surged through him, driving his desperate struggle to reach the boat. The stingray, pivoting with surprising agility, advanced toward him again. Its panic had turned into aggression, and Mike knew he had to escape soon or face a deadly strike. He pushed himself harder, every muscle protesting, but the boat was finally within reach. The deck loomed ahead, and with one final, determined push, Mike reached for safety. With a final desperate effort, Mike reached the boat's side, his exhausted hands struggling to grip the wet edge. His strength was nearly gone, but his survival instinct pushed him on. He managed to hoist himself halfway out of the water. Just then, the stingray lashed out again, its tail grazing Mike's leg. The pain was immediate and intense, a searing burn that shot through him. Despite the agony, he continued to pull himself up, finally collapsing onto the deck, drenched and gasping for breath. Lying there, Mike tried to catch his breath, the pain in his leg relentless. Slowly, he turned his head to check on the stingray. It had drifted away, leaving only a ripple in the water. Wincing as he sat up, Mike inspected the wound on his leg. A deep gash from the stingray's barb was bleeding and radiating sharp pain. Knowing the potential seriousness of stingray injuries, he needed to clean the wound immediately to prevent further complications. Using the boat's railing for support, he hobbled to the first aid kit. His hands shook with pain as he gathered antiseptic wipes, gauze, and bandages. Every movement was a struggle, the venom's effects intensifying the throbbing in his leg. He opened an antiseptic wipe and pressed it against the wound, wincing as the sting intensified. Despite the sharp pain, he continued to clean the area, his hands trembling. The antiseptic burned fiercely, but he pressed on, knowing he needed to minimize the risk of infection. Once the wound was cleaned, Mike wrapped it tightly with gauze and secured it with a bandage. Though not perfect, the dressing would hold until he reached shore. He needed to get medical attention as soon as possible, and every minute counted. In the summer of 2001, Tom Lawson, a seasoned fisherman in his mid-40s, set out for a fishing trip in the Gulf of Mexico. He was an experienced angler, known among his friends for his patience and skill. Tom had been fishing the Gulf's waters for years, but this trip was special. He had planned it for months, hoping to reel in something extraordinary. The Gulf of Mexico, with its warm waters and abundant marine life, was the perfect place to find the catch of a lifetime. Tom's destination was a remote spot about 20 miles off the coast of Florida, known among locals as the Deep. This area was famous for its large fish, including the elusive giant grouper. Groupers in the Gulf could grow to enormous sizes, some weighing over 800 pounds. These fish were a challenge to catch, and even more challenging to bring to the surface, but that was exactly what Tom was looking for. On the morning of August 12th, Tom and his close friend Jim boarded their small fishing boat and set out into the Gulf. The air was warm and the sea was calm as they navigated the familiar waters. Both men were in high spirits, sharing stories and laughing as they anticipated the day ahead. The Gulf was beautiful that day, and everything seemed to be in their favor. After a few hours of cruising, they arrived at the deep. Tom anchored the boat, and the men began preparing their gear. Tom's setup was impressive, a heavy-duty rod and reel designed to handle the immense weight and power of the Gulf's largest fish. He baited his hook with a large chunk of mackerel, hoping it would attract something big. The wait was long, but Tom didn't mind. He had fished these waters many times and knew that patience was the key to success. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the two men relaxed, sipping on cold drinks and talking about everything from fishing tales to family life. The calm rhythm of the ocean and the anticipation of the unknown made the time pass quickly. Suddenly, Tom felt a strong tug on his line. His heart skipped a beat as he gripped the rod and began reeling in. Whatever was on the other end was massive. The line strained under the weight, and Tom's muscles tensed as he fought to keep the rod steady. Jim, noticing the struggle, quickly moved to help, but Tom waved him off. This was his fight, and he wanted to see it through. The battle was intense. The fish on the line was powerful, pulling with such force that Tom had to plant his feet firmly on the deck to avoid being dragged overboard. He could feel every movement of the creature below, each tug and surge sending vibrations up the line and through his body. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he focused all his energy on reeling in the catch. As the minutes passed, Tom began to gain the upper hand. Slowly but surely, he reeled the fish closer to the surface. His excitement grew as he caught glimpses of the enormous shadow moving beneath the water. It was a grouper, a giant, much larger than anything he had ever seen before. The sight of it filled him with both awe and a sense of impending challenge. The fish was nearly at the surface, and Tom knew the hardest part was yet to come. As the giant grouper neared the boat, it suddenly changed its behavior. The fish, realizing it was close to the surface, became agitated. It thrashed violently, sending waves splashing against the side of the boat. Tom tightened his grip on the rod, bracing himself for the struggle to come. The grouper's massive body twisted and turned, its powerful tail churning the water into a frothy mess. Without warning, the grouper made a powerful lunge towards the boat. The sudden movement caught Tom off guard, nearly pulling him off his feet. The fish, driven by a primal instinct to survive, surged toward Tom with terrifying force. The line, now taut as a bowstring, hummed under the strain as the fish closed the distance. The next moment was a blur. The grouper, in a desperate attempt to free itself, slammed into the side of the boat, knocking Tom off balance. He stumbled, his legs giving way as the fish made a final, violent thrust. Tom was yanked forward, and before he could react, he was partially dragged over the side of the boat. His leg dangled in the water, and in an instant, the grouper clamped down with its powerful jaws. Pain shot through Tom's leg as the grouper's teeth sank into his flesh. The shock of the attack left him momentarily paralyzed, his mind racing to comprehend what had just happened. The fish, now more desperate than ever, began to thrash wildly, pulling Tom further over the side. He could feel the immense power of the grouper as it tried to drag him into the water, where it would have the advantage. Tom's survival instincts kicked in. He knew that if he was pulled into the water, his chances of survival would be slim. With his free hand, he reached for the fishing knife strapped to his belt. His fingers fumbled with the handle, slick with sweat and seawater, but he managed to grip it tightly. With a swift motion, he drove the knife into the grouper's side. The fish reacted immediately, releasing Tom's leg as it recoiled in pain. Blood mixed with the seawater, clouding the water around them. But the grouper was not done yet. It thrashed even more violently, sending shockwaves through the water and the boat. Tom could feel the boat rocking beneath him, the force of the fish nearly tipping it over. Jim, who had been watching the ordeal with mounting horror, rushed to help. He grabbed Tom by the arms, pulling him back onto the boat with all his strength. Tom, his leg bleeding profusely, clung to the side of the boat, his heart pounding in his chest. The grouper, wounded but not defeated, made one last attempt to escape. It surged away from the boat, the line snapping under the strain. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the sound of Tom's heavy breathing. The water around the boat was still, the giant grouper gone, leaving behind only a trail of blood and the shattered remnants of the line. Tom lay on the deck, his leg throbbing with pain, but relief washed over him. He had survived the encounter, but just barely. Jim quickly grabbed a first aid kit and began tending to Tom's wounds. The deep gashes in his leg were serious, but they had avoided the worst. Tom winced as Jim cleaned the wounds, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. The realization of what had just happened began to sink in. The sheer power of the giant grouper, the struggle for survival, and the narrow escape. It was 2010, one of those sun-dappled days in the Florida Keys. The turquoise waters of the Atlantic were beckoning to the scores of divers and spearfishermen who came to this famed diving destination. Among them was 42-year-old Eddie Grayson, who had over 10 years as a professional spearfisherman. His wetsuit-clad form glided effortlessly through the shallowing depths, carpeted with coral boulders, while looking for his next prize catch. The Florida Keys was a real spearfishing paradise, full of abundant, highly sought-after species: grouper, snapper, and other prized fish. Over the years, he had learned how to read his quarry's shifting currents and movements, striking with pinpoint precision. That day, he was determined to bag a few good-sized groupers and return them to his local seafood market, which was in high demand. An hour of patience detailed sweeping over the reefs and ledges was rewarded as Eddie's sharp eyes finally locked onto a large grouper, hovering over a big, jagged coral head. He slowly and silently positioned himself, took good care in aiming, and speared the fish with a mighty thrust of his spear gun through the midsection. Pleased with his catch, he started swimming upward, his prized grouper in tow. A searing, sinking pain suddenly shot through Eddie's right arm, and with a muffled cry of agony, he dropped the grouper, which tumbled back into the azure depths. Whirling in panic, he turned to find himself face to face with a massive barracuda, just an arm's length away. Its gaping jaws, lined with razor-sharp teeth, seemed poised for another strike, ready to deliver a deadly blow. Eddie's heart pounded in his chest as he stared into the predatory eyes of the fearsome fish. This barracuda was not going to back down. Known for their aggressive, predatory nature and flash attacks, this one had probably been attracted by the smell of blood from the speared grouper, and now mistook the spearfisherman for its next meal. Eddie's heart began to race as he realized how precarious the situation he had landed in. Barracudas are among the most vicious apex predators, and a full-on attack by one would be fatal. He needed to think fast to fend off the barracuda and return safely to his boat. Without hesitation, Eddie thrashed and kicked violently to put as much space as he could between himself and the relentless predator circling him. The barracuda, undeterred, kept after him with chomping jaws inches from Eddie's quivering, unprotected body. He felt the icy, hard scales of the barracuda almost scraping his skin, as it had done many times already in its attempt to clamp down on him. With a surge of adrenaline, Eddie began to look in every direction for a path of flight or refuge from the killing frenzy. He sprinted towards a small, narrow fissure in the nearby reef and dived into it with the hope of taking cover there and shaking the barracuda in the tight, convoluted spaces of the coral. As he squeezed through the narrow opening, so did the barracuda, its tremendous and powerful body wedging into the confined space. Now the two were locked in an immovable standoff as the barracuda thrashed and snapped wildly in a struggle to devour its prey. Trapped and running perilously low on air, Eddie knew he had to act fast. Summoning every ounce of strength and courage, he started punching and kicking at the barracuda, trying to get blows into the creature's sensitive eyes and gills. Dazed by this quite unexpected assault, the barracuda recoiled for a moment, and Eddie took the opportunity to slip free and make a desperate dash for the surface. Breaking out of the water, he gasped for air, his arms and chest throbbing from the barracuda's savage attack. He scanned frantically across the surface and saw his boat only a short way away. Summoning up the last of his energy, Eddie swam towards it and hauled himself onto the deck, finally safe from the jaws of the relentless predator, which later went back to the deep waters. Still in shock, his heart racing wildly in his chest, Eddie examined his wounds once on board. He had a deep laceration in the right arm, punctured several times by these razor-sharp barracuda teeth. The wounds were very painful but not life-threatening, fortunately. They would no doubt require immediate medical treatment. Shaken, spent, and still in shock from the experience, Eddie radioed the Coast Guard and was attended within minutes. Assessing the condition of Eddie, the Coast Guard crew whisked him away to the nearest hospital, where the doctors could attend properly to his wounds. In the hospital, doctors cleaned and dressed Eddie's wounds, congratulating him on his presence of mind and his sheer resilience in the wake of such a harrowing, life-threatening attack. They were just in disbelief that he had escaped the jaws of one of the ocean's most formidable predators relatively unscathed. As Eddie recovered, he played the experience over and over again in his mind. For the first time in his life, he had witnessed the naked, brutal power of the sea, something he had learned as a basic lesson about underlying risk and unpredictability in the underwater world. It had been an experience he would never forget, and now he knew he would enter into every future spearfishing outing with a much sharper eye out for nature's sometimes deadly forces. Within days, Eddie's story spread from person to person within the local diving and fishing communities, its dramatic details easily captivating audiences. Many were impressed with his pluck and quick thinking during such a harrowing attack, while others warned of the risks of spearfishing in aggressive territories of marine life. It had been a very sober awakening for Eddie. All his life, he had prided himself on being an accomplished, seasoned spearfisherman who knew much about the ocean and its residents. Yet this encounter had served as a rude shake to his confidence that suddenly made him realize that any diver could become just another of the ocean's meals, no matter how seasoned. Eddie spent some time off spearfishing to recover physically and emotionally. He knew he had to process the trauma from the attack, regain his confidence in his ability to protect himself, and learn how to feel safe again within his underwater world. Eddie paused and asked himself one question during that time: whether he would ever return to a sport once so dear to him. Meanwhile, the huge barracuda that nailed Eddie roamed back into the big blue expanse of the Florida Keys, a powerful reminder of the delicate balance between man and nature. The incident reignited discussions within the diving and fishing communities about respecting apex ocean predators and creating greater education and awareness among recreational divers and spearfishermen. Eddie learned many valuable lessons from his encounter with the large barracuda. The incident left an indelible mark on his body and mind. The scars on his arm were a perpetual reminder of the ocean's mighty power and unpredictable nature. The day began with promise as the sun rose over the Indonesian coast, casting a warm glow on the turquoise waters. Jake, eager for this dive, was about to tick off a bucket list adventure, exploring one of the world's most vibrant coral reefs. Known for its rich biodiversity, the area promised a dazzling display of marine life. Jake, an experienced diver, was brimming with excitement as the boat approached the dive site. The boat's engine hummed, leaving a trail of foam behind. The crew delivered a final briefing, highlighting the reef's beauty and potential dangers. Jake listened attentively, though his thoughts were already immersed in the underwater world he was about to explore. He meticulously checked his gear, ensuring his underwater camera was secure. The camera, a new addition, was intended to capture the reef's stunning details. Arriving at the dive site, Jake's heart raced at the sight of the shimmering, crystal-clear water revealing the vibrant reef below. The dive master signaled, and one by one the group entered the water, leaving the sun's warmth behind. Jake was among the last to enter, savoring the anticipation. As he descended, the surface sounds faded, replaced by the soothing murmur of the ocean. The water was cool and refreshing as he adjusted his buoyancy and floated downward. The reef below emerged as a living tapestry of corals, sponges, and sea fans swaying gently in the current. Schools of fish darted through the coral, their scales sparkling like jewels. While moving along the reef, Jake noticed a flash of movement in his peripheral vision. He turned slowly and spotted a moray eel, partially hidden in a coral crevice. Its greenish-brown skin blended with the surroundings, but its head, with intense eyes and sharp teeth, was unmistakable. Jake knew moray eels could be aggressive, but the photographer in him was drawn to the opportunity for a close-up shot. He hovered at a safe distance, raising his camera to capture the eel's menacing expression. The initial shots were stunning, but Jake aimed for a better angle and lighting. He edged closer, his movements slow and deliberate, focused solely on getting the perfect shot. Unaware of the subtle shift in the eel's posture, Jake was too engrossed in his task. Suddenly, the eel lunged at lightning speed. Jake barely had time to react before feeling a sharp, searing pain in his arm. The eel's powerful jaws clamped down with terrifying force. Bubbles erupted from his regulator as pain surged through his body. Instinctively, Jake tried to pull away, but the eel's ironclad grip tightened, its teeth digging more profound with every movement. Panic surged through Jake as he felt the moray eel's grip tighten on his arm. The pain was excruciating, and despite his desperate efforts to free himself, the eel's hold seemed to grow stronger. His vision blurred from the pain, and he could feel warm blood mingling with the water, clouding his sight. The once clear water turned a swirling mix of red and blue, attracting other marine life. Small fish darted in and out of the blood cloud, while larger predators lurked nearby, drawn by the scent of blood. Jake's heart raced, but he fought to stay calm as the eel's jaws crushed his arm with relentless pressure. His dive buddy, exploring a nearby section of the reef, noticed the commotion and quickly swam over. Horror filled his eyes as he grabbed a dive knife and began prodding the eel, trying to force it to release its grip. Yet the eel, driven by primal instincts, resisted every attempt. Jake's vision began to darken at the edges from pain and blood loss. He struggled to stay conscious, the cold water feeling oppressive as if closing in on him. His arm throbbed with a dull ache, and he knew that passing out could mean never waking up. Desperate, Jake's buddy drove the knife into the eel's side. The eel thrashed violently, and for a moment it seemed it might let go. However, with a sickening lurch, the eel tore a chunk of flesh from Jake's arm before retreating into its crevice, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Jake's arm was a mess of torn skin and muscle, bleeding profusely. He clutched the wound with his other hand, trying to stem the blood flow, but the pain was overwhelming. His buddy grabbed him and started pulling him toward the surface, kicking hard to ascend without risking decompression sickness. The ascent felt like an eternity. Every second was a battle to stay conscious, to breathe, and to endure the waves of pain. The water, once a sanctuary, now felt cold and unyielding. The surface seemed impossibly far, and Jake's vision continued to fade, his consciousness fraying with the agony. Finally, they broke through the surface, the sunlight blinding after the darkness below. The dive crew quickly sprang into action, hauling Jake onto the boat and pressing bandages to his wound in a frantic attempt to stop the bleeding. Their voices were urgent but seemed distant, as if from another world. His body shook uncontrollably from shock as his mind struggled to process the ordeal. As the boat sped toward shore, Jake lay on the deck, staring up at the sky. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the intense pain in his arm. Every nerve screamed in agony as blood seeped through the bandages. A primal fear gripped him. Fear that this might be his last adventure, that he might not make it back to shore. Despite the encroaching darkness, Jake focused on his breathing, the rise and fall of his chest and the cool breeze on his face. He wasn't ready to give up. There was still a fight left in him, a spark of life that refused to be extinguished. The shoreline grew closer as the boat raced across the water, the crew working tirelessly to keep Jake stable. With adrenaline dulling the pain just enough to think clearly, Jake realized he had survived the attack. Now, he needed to endure the aftermath. The struggle was far from over, with surgeries and a long recovery ahead. His confidence was shattered, his body broken, but he was still alive. And that, for now, was what mattered most. In the summer of 2003, Kate Thompson, a 25-year-old marine biology student from the United States, was living her dream. She had traveled to the Caribbean, specifically to the beautiful island of St. Lucia, to participate in a research expedition focused on the vibrant coral reefs that surrounded the island. The reefs were a dazzling array of colors and life, teeming with species of fish, corals, and other marine organisms. For Kate, this trip was more than just a research opportunity. It was an adventure, a chance to explore one of the most diverse ecosystems on the planet. On a bright July morning, Kate and her dive partner Laura prepared for a day of diving at a well-known reef called Anse Chastanet. The area was famous for its stunning underwater landscapes and the variety of marine life that could be found there. The waters around St. Lucia were warm and clear, making it a popular destination for divers from all over the world. But with its beauty came risks, as the Caribbean Sea was home to some of the ocean's most formidable predators. Kate and Laura had been diving together for several years, and they trusted each other completely. They had planned this dive carefully, ensuring that all their gear was in top condition. As they boarded the small dive boat that would take them to the reef, the excitement was palpable. The boat ride was short, and soon they were donning their wetsuits and checking their tanks. The dive site was just a short distance from shore, and as the boat anchored, they could see the reef below, its colors shimmering through the crystal clear water. Kate was the first to enter the water, and the coolness of the ocean was a welcome contrast to the warm Caribbean sun. She adjusted her mask and regulator, then signaled to Laura before descending into the depths. The underwater world opened up before her, a kaleidoscope of movement and color. Schools of fish darted between the corals while sea fans swayed gently with the current. Kate was in her element, her heart filled with a sense of wonder and respect for the life that surrounded her. As they explored the reef, Kate and Laura communicated with hand signals, pointing out interesting species and formations. Kate was particularly interested in the large parrotfish that grazed on the coral, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the deep blues and greens of the ocean. The dive was going smoothly, and they were collecting valuable data for their research. But as they moved deeper along the reef, Kate noticed something unusual. A sleek silver shape glided through the water a short distance away. It was a barracuda, one of the fastest and most aggressive predators in the Caribbean. Known for their speed and razor-sharp teeth, barracudas are often feared by divers, not only for their predatory nature but also for their unpredictable behavior. Kate had encountered barracudas before, but this one was different. It was much larger and appeared to be watching her intently. The barracuda's presence made Kate uneasy, but she tried to remain calm. She knew that sudden movements could provoke an attack, so she continued to swim slowly, keeping the fish in her peripheral vision. The barracuda, however, seemed to be following her, drawn to the glint of her diving gear in the sunlight. The tension in the water was palpable, and Kate could feel her pulse quicken. She signaled to Laura, who had also noticed the barracuda, and they both began to move toward shallower water. But the barracuda was not going to let them go so easily. As Kate and Laura swam cautiously toward the safety of the shallower reef, the barracuda suddenly accelerated, closing the distance between them in a matter of seconds. Kate barely had time to react before the fish was upon her, its sharp teeth flashing in the sunlight. The attack was swift and brutal. The barracuda struck with terrifying speed, sinking its teeth into Kate's arm with a force that left her stunned. Pain shot through Kate's body as the barracuda's teeth tore into her flesh. The water around her turned red as blood began to cloud the crystal-clear water. The suddenness of the attack left her in shock, her mind racing as she tried to process what had just happened. The barracuda, its primal instincts triggered by the taste of blood, released her arm only to circle back for another attack. Kate knew she had to act quickly. Her training kicked in as she frantically kicked her legs, trying to distance herself from the predator. She signaled desperately to Laura, who was already swimming toward her, her eyes wide with fear. The barracuda, undeterred, circled back and charged again, this time aiming for Kate's leg. Kate managed to twist away just in time, but the fish's teeth grazed her thigh, leaving another painful wound. Despite the searing pain, Kate fought to remain calm. She kicked with all her strength, trying to fend off the relentless predator while signaling for help. Her vision blurred as the blood continued to flow from her wounds, but she knew she had to keep fighting. The barracuda, now frenzied by the scent of blood, made another pass. But this time, Kate used her remaining strength to punch at the fish, her fists connecting with its sleek, muscular body. The barracuda recoiled, momentarily stunned by the unexpected resistance. It hovered in the water, its dark eyes fixed on Kate as it assessed its next move. But before it could strike again, Laura reached Kate's side, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her toward the surface. The two women swam as fast as they could, their movements fueled by adrenaline and fear. The barracuda followed for a few more seconds, but then, as quickly as it had appeared, it turned and disappeared into the blue. Breaking through the surface of the water, Kate gasped for air, her body trembling with pain and shock. Laura, equally shaken, held on to her friend, keeping her afloat as they signaled frantically for the dive boat. The crew, having seen the commotion, sped toward them, their faces etched with concern. Within moments, they were pulled aboard and Kate collapsed on the deck, her arm and leg bleeding profusely. The crew quickly began administering first aid, applying pressure to Kate's wounds to stem the bleeding. Kate lay on the deck, her breathing ragged, as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The vibrant, beautiful reef that she had been so eager to explore had turned into a scene of terror. The barracuda's attack had been sudden and savage, a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked beneath the surface of the ocean. An idyllic 2014 kayaking holiday with the Williamson family down the Daly River in the Northern Territory of Australia has become any family's worst nightmare after the kayakers entered saltwater crocodile territory. Michael and Sarah Williamson, with their 12-year-old son Jack, had been luxuriating in the lush, winding waterways, diving headfirst into the wildest beauty the Australian outback had to offer. As the paddling extended further upstream into the estuary, all the excitement within the family members suddenly turned into anxiety. The earlier attractive water became murky, and the vegetation was fast, giving long shadows along the shore. Sarah turned to Michael and shared her uneasy feelings about the surroundings. At first, Jack could only make out that most dreadful confirmation of their worst fears, a half-submerged log off the bank. Dismayed, they suddenly saw it was nothing but the unmistakable shape of a huge saltwater crocodile, with only its half-submerged eyes out of the water. With great self-restraint, Michael instructed his family to stay calm, begin paddling toward shore, and not make any sudden movements. They did just that, paddling slowly, not taking their eyes off the unmoving predator. Every second it seemed like they would make it to shore without any problems. But almost immediately all those dreams came crashing down as the crocodile lunged at them suddenly in the next instant, with frightful velocity. Michael screamed at his family, asking them to paddle for their lives, the ferocious paddling turning away from rowing with wild abandon as they splashed water in the air and rowed towards the nearest bank. But the effort proved in vain. The crocodile matched their pace and was faster. Its bulk easily cleaved the water. In a pulse-pounding moment, the creature sprang, its enormous jaws clamping onto the back of Michael and Jack's kayak. The force of the attack sent both father and son tumbling into the depths, and Sarah watched helplessly in horror as her husband and son disappeared beneath the surface. She had already arrived near the bank in her kayak. The paternal instincts came to the fore as Michael managed to panic in the water. Breaking the surface and gasping, he looked around for Jack. As luck would have it, Jack's head broke the water's surface a few meters away, then coughed and spluttered. Michael shouted to Sarah to throw them the paddles from her kayak. As Michael and Jack grabbed the paddles, the water splashed around them. The crocodile had finished their kayak and was now on its living target. Michael told Jack to keep close to him as he was getting ready to fight off this creature. Ancient, predatory eyes watched the pitiful humans as the great beast charged. With all his strength, Michael struck the reptile's nose, and though Jack shivered with fear, he boldly followed his father's lead. Father and son swung at the gator's muzzle together as the menace lunged again. Sarah stayed in her kayak, torn between the drive to save her family and the realization that she would just end up dead in the water if she got in. That was when she decided to splash as much as possible with her paddle to distract the crocodile. Michael took the opportunity as the croc was about to let go of his meal and instructed Jack to swim toward the shore. As Sarah swam to the bank, she noticed a small rocky island only a couple of yards from the beach and motioned them toward it as it was much nearer than the bank. The family fought helplessly, with Sarah paddling toward Jack and Michael, prepared to whack the crocodile away if it pushed closer. The crocodile lunged one more time as they neared the island, and its jaws snapped shut just a few inches from Jack's legs. In one last surge of furious protection, Michael smacked his paddle at the crocodile's head with increasing force, hitting it on the side of its head and momentarily stunning it. It was all they needed, his tiny moment of hesitation. With a final burst of energy, they hauled themselves onto the jagged shore of the small island. Gasping for breath, they collapsed on the rough ground, their bodies trembling from sheer exhaustion and overwhelming fear. Michael quickly checked to see if everyone was all right, while Sarah, consumed by relief, clung tightly to Jack, vowing never to let him go. In what seemed a never-ending day, the family tried to nap on a little haven near the rocky island, where the sun had started setting and casting long shadows on the water. The crocodile did not move further. It just sat a fixed presence with its prehistoric eyes, never leaving Sarah. She blamed Michael for what had happened. It was meant to be a fun family vacation, but now it has become a nightmare. Michael apologized for not researching the area better, but Jack told his father that no one could have known about the crocodiles. The sounds of the Australian wild seemed amplified, merging with Jack's soft whines as he shivered, cold and wet. Sarah tried to comfort him with stories of happier times, recalling better experiences. The family shared a quiet laugh, remembering the infamous sunburn that had left Michael's neck and back painfully red during a previous beach trip. The memory brought a brief moment of warmth and connection, easing the tension of their current ordeal. Michael told them he'd check the island's perimeter to find a better place to signal for help. While he was out, Jack asked his mother if they were going to die on this island. Sarah pacified her little boy, saying that more often than not, being brave doesn't mean that a person is not scared, just that he should have done what he needed. Michael came back, assuring his family that the island was not that big, but he had found a slight rise where they would be recognized easily by anyone looking around for them. What followed was long hours of silent and motionless watch over the crocodile, sometimes diving under the water and coming up again nearer the island, testing their nerve. As the first light of dawn began to break, Jack heard the distant sound of a helicopter engine. As the helicopter appeared over the tree line with its searchlight across the river, the family began waving their arms aloft and shouting at the tops of their heads. There was a harrowing moment when it almost seemed that the helicopter would bypass them altogether. But then the beam swiveled toward them as it caught their little island with its cast of light. A rescue worker was winched onto the island, quickly confirming their identities before rapidly assessing the situation. He urged them to move quickly. The crocodile remained in the area. One by one, the family was lifted into the helicopter, each feeling relief. As they ascended, they finally caught a glimpse of the full size of the colossal, prehistoric-looking creature that had relentlessly pursued them, its massive form a stark reminder of their narrow escape. As they all huddled together inside the helicopter, the family was clutching on one another, bringing home the full realization of their ordeal and how close they were to death that afternoon. The pilot said they were lucky, as few people survived encounters with saltwater crocodiles. The Williamson were fortunate to have survived the ordeal as they left the island with the crocodile still roaming in the waters, probably looking for other prey. The bond within the Williamson family had been tested and solidified unimaginably. Their kayaking trip might have turned deadly, but love, dedication, and determination had seen it through. The memory of their encounter with the crocodile would be etched into them forever, a testament to their resiliency and the power of family. The Okavango Delta in Botswana is an extraordinary landscape where the arid Kalahari sands meet a maze of life-rich waterways. Seasonally nourished by rains, this delta transforms into a lush paradise teeming with wildlife. However, beneath its tranquil surface lurks a dangerous secret, formidable predators like the Nile crocodile. Emily, Aubrey, Lamar, Derek, Jeffrey, and Graham had meticulously planned their camping trip for months. They were seasoned adventurers accustomed to diverse terrains and countries, yet the Okavango Delta was uncharted territory for them. Excited by its reputation as a wildlife haven, they embraced the challenge, knowing the Delta's raw power demanded respect. Their campsite was idyllic, perched on a rise a few meters from the water's edge. The site offered panoramic views of the Delta's splendor, with reeds swaying gently and a canopy of acacia trees providing welcome shade. As evening fell, they gathered around a campfire, casting long shadows and transforming the Delta's vibrant daytime energy into a more ominous atmosphere. The wildlife calls grew more urgent, and the rustling in the bushes seemed charged with predatory intent. Emily, tired from the day's adventures, retired early to her tent near the water. The soothing sound of the river was intended to lull her to sleep, yet an unsettling feeling began to creep over her. Despite the serene surroundings, she felt a nagging sense of vulnerability. As the night deepened and the campfire dwindled to embers, the group drifted into sleep. The Delta, now shrouded in darkness, was illuminated only by the moon's silvery light. The group's slumber was deep, unaware of the lurking danger. Beneath the seemingly calm waters, a Nile crocodile stalked the shallows. This ancient predator, with its immense strength and stealth, had detected the vibrations from the campers and was drawn by their presence. Perfectly adapted to its environment, the crocodile's patience and power made it a formidable hunter. A searing pain in her leg abruptly woke Emily. Confusion gave way to terror as she realized a powerful creature was gripping her. Peering through the pain, She saw the distinct, jagged outline of a crocodile's head, its teeth embedded in her flesh. Panic surged through her as the crocodile began dragging her toward the water. The pain was excruciating, her body scraping against the ground as the creature's strength overwhelmed her. Desperate, she tried to resist, digging her fingers into the dirt, but the crocodile's pull was relentless. Her screams pierced the night, raw and desperate, alerting her friends to the nightmare unfolding. Lamar was the first to respond, grabbing her arms and pulling with all his strength. The others quickly joined, forming a human chain to counter the crocodile's pull. But the crocodile was mighty. Its muscular body and leverage in the water made it nearly impossible to dislodge. Derek seized a large rock and struck the crocodile's head, but the impact barely registered. Jeffrey grabbed a stick and jabbed at the crocodile's eyes in a bid to exploit its vulnerable spots. Yet the predator twisted with terrifying agility, avoiding the attacks. The situation grew increasingly desperate as the crocodile inched Emily closer to the water. Each movement of the beast drew her further into its domain. The delta's water was the crocodile's realm, where it had the upper hand. If it succeeded in pulling her in, the chances of saving her were grim. The friends fought with everything they had, their fear and determination blending in a frantic struggle against the relentless predator. The night they echoed with the sounds of their desperate battle, each moment bringing them closer to a potentially tragic outcome. Aubrey acted swiftly, seizing a burning log from the dying campfire. It was a desperate move, but their options were exhausted. She thrust the flaming log towards the crocodile's face, the heat searing its scales. The crocodile flinched but held on, unyielding. With the group continuing to pull Emily, Lamar took the burning log and pressed it against the crocodile's snout. This time, the reaction was immediate. The crocodile released its grip and thrashed violently as it retreated toward the water. Emily was left sprawled on the ground, her leg badly mangled and bleeding. The group collapsed, shaking with adrenaline as the crocodile slipped back into the river. The water soon returned to its peaceful state, but the lingering sense of danger was palpable. Emily lay gasping, her leg throbbing with pain. The friends quickly sprang into action, tearing fabric from their clothes to create makeshift bandages. They worked urgently, trying to stop the bleeding and stabilize her leg. The injuries were severe, with deep puncture wounds and significant tissue damage from the crocodile's powerful jaws. There was no time to waste. They needed to get Emily to a hospital, but the nearest medical facility was hours away, and they were deep in the delta. The urgency of their situation was apparent. Graham and Jeffrey packed essential supplies while Lamar and Derek carefully lifted Emily, carrying her between them. Aubrey stayed close, ready to help, and haunted by thoughts of what could have happened if they had been any slower, or if the crocodile had been more relentless. The trek back to their vehicle was grueling. Emily's injured body slowed their progress as they navigated the uneven terrain. Every rustle and splash heightened their fear of other predators lurking in the darkness. The delta's wildlife, both beautiful and dangerous, seemed to close in around them. Despite the fear and exhaustion, the group pushed on, driven by the need to get Emily to safety. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale from blood loss, and time was against them. Lamar and Derek took turns carrying her while Aubrey, Graham, and Jeffrey kept watch, their senses heightened by the looming threat of another attack. The journey to their 4x4 felt endless, with the darkness making the landscape appear more hostile. The weak beams of their flashlights cast long, flickering shadows, turning the once majestic delta into a foreboding expanse. When they finally reached their vehicle, they carefully loaded Emily into the back, cushioning her with whatever they could to minimize jolting. Graham took the wheel, his grip tight on the steering wheel, while Aubrey stayed beside Emily, applying pressure to her wounds and keeping her conscious. The drive out of the delta was harrowing. The rough terrain caused painful jolts, and Emily's condition worsened. She was slipping in and out of consciousness, her vision blurring from blood loss. The others could do little but hope they would reach help in time. The night seemed endless as they navigated the winding dirt roads. The vehicle's headlights occasionally illuminated the eyes of distant animals, but the outside world remained an impenetrable void. The engine's rumble and Emily's labored breathing were the only sounds breaking the silence. At last, they arrived at a small outpost, Local guides and rangers quickly assessed the situation and called for emergency help. An airlift was arranged, and while they waited, the rangers provided first aid and pain relief. The group, exhausted and emotionally drained, stayed close to Emily, who appeared pale and barely conscious. When the helicopter arrived, its rotors slicing through the morning air, relief mingled with urgency. Emily was carefully lifted onto a stretcher and flown to safety. As the helicopter vanished into the distance, the group watched, the weight of their harrowing experience settling in. They had survived a terrifying encounter with one of nature's most fearsome predators, but the scars, both physical and emotional, would take time to heal. The Okavango Delta, with its stunning yet perilous beauty, had left a lasting mark on them all. In early December 2005, Paul Fisher, a 34-year-old adventure enthusiast from Perth, Australia, set out for a solo kayaking trip along the rugged coastline of Western Australia. Known for its stunning landscapes and diverse marine life, the area around Shark Bay was a favorite spot for thrill-seekers like Paul. The pristine waters were home to dolphins, turtles, and of course the occasional shark. Paul had kayaked these waters many times before, confident in his skills and knowledge of the ocean. But on this day, he would encounter something far more dangerous than he had ever anticipated. The morning began like any other on the western coast, bright and sunny, with a slight breeze ruffling the surface of the water. Paul launched his kayak from a secluded beach, the sand warm under his feet as he pushed off into the gentle waves. He was in high spirits, eager to explore the coastal caves and rocky outcrops that dotted the shoreline. The ocean was calm, and Paul paddled effortlessly, enjoying the solitude and the rhythmic sound of his paddle cutting through the water. As he ventured further from shore, the familiar landscape began to change. The water deepened, taking on a darker hue, and the gentle waves became more unpredictable. But Paul, an experienced kayaker, wasn't concerned. He knew these waters well, or so he thought. The sun climbed higher in the sky as he continued paddling, the coastline now a distant line on the horizon. Paul felt a sense of freedom out here in the open ocean, away from the noise and busyness of everyday life. About an hour into his journey, Paul decided to take a break. He stopped paddling, letting the kayak drift as he took a moment to appreciate the vastness of the ocean. The water around him was eerily still, the only sound the distant cry of a seabird. But as he sat there, something caught his attention. A dark shadow moving beneath the surface of the water. At first, Paul thought it might be a large fish or even a dolphin, but as the shape drew closer, he realized with a jolt of fear that it was something much more dangerous. Bull sharks were notorious in these waters, known for their aggressive nature and tendency to swim in both salt and fresh water. They were one of the few shark species that could thrive in rivers and estuaries, as well as the open ocean, making them particularly dangerous. Paul had heard stories of bull sharks attacking swimmers and surfers, but he had never imagined he would encounter one so far out at sea. The shark began to circle the kayak, its movement slow and deliberate. Paul's heart raced as he watched the massive creature glide through the water, its dorsal fin cutting the surface like a knife. The kayak, which had felt so stable moments ago, now seemed flimsy and vulnerable. Paul knew he had to stay calm, but the sight of the shark was enough to send a chill down his spine. The bull shark circled once more, then twice, before bumping the kayak with a force that nearly knocked Paul off balance. The impact sent a shockwave through the small vessel, and Paul instinctively grabbed the sides, trying to steady himself. The shark bumped the kayak again, this time with more force as if testing its strength. Paul realized with a sinking feeling that the shark was not just curious, it was hungry. Before Paul could react, the bull shark launched a full attack. With a powerful surge, the shark rammed the kayak, flipping it over in one swift motion. Paul was thrown into the water, the cold ocean engulfing him as he struggled to right himself. Panic set in as he realized his worst fear had come true. He was in the water, with an aggressive shark circling nearby. The shark wasted no time. As Paul surfaced, gasping for air, the shark lunged at him, its powerful jaws clamping down on his leg. The pain was immediate and intense, radiating up his leg as the shark's teeth tore into his flesh. Paul screamed in agony, his voice lost in the vastness of the ocean. The shark began to drag him under, its grip unyielding as it pulled him deeper into the water. Desperation and fear fueled Paul's fight for survival. He kicked wildly with his free leg, aiming for the shark's snout, the only vulnerable part of the predator. The shark thrashed in response, its powerful body twisting in the water as it tried to subdue its prey. Paul could feel his strength waning, the cold water sapping his energy as the shark pulled him further down. The surface seemed impossibly far away, and with every passing second his chances of survival grew slimmer. But Paul refused to give up. Summoning the last of his strength, he reached down and jabbed his fingers into the shark's eyes. The shark recoiled in pain, loosening its grip just enough for Paul to break free. Blood clouded the water around him, but he forced himself to swim upward, each stroke a battle against the darkness closing in around him. The need for air drove him forward, and the instinct to survive pushed him beyond his limits. Breaking through the surface, Paul gasped for breath, his lungs burning as he gulped down air. The shark, momentarily disoriented, circled below, but it seemed to lose interest in its injured prey. Paul clung to the overturned kayak, his body trembling from the cold and the shock of the attack. He was bleeding heavily, his leg a searing mass of pain, but he was alive. A boat drawn by the commotion sped toward him. The crew, horrified by the sight of the bloodied man clinging to the kayak, quickly pulled him aboard. Paul collapsed on the deck, his body weak and his mind reeling from the ordeal. The boat raced back to shore, but Paul barely registered the journey. His thoughts were consumed by the attack, the sight of the shark, and the realization that he had come within moments of death. The bull shark, one of the ocean's most feared predators, had left Paul with life-threatening injuries and a deep-seated fear of the sea. The ocean, once a place of adventure and freedom, had shown its darker side, and Paul knew he would never view it the same way again. It was a brisk morning in the year 2009 along the rugged Oregon coast, where the sound of crashing waves and the salty tang of the sea air permeated the air. A 28-year-old avid surfer, Anna Schofield, was eager to catch the perfect wave before the crowds arrived. She had been surfing this stretch of coastline for years. Still, that day she was about to encounter a shocking and terrifying experience that would forever change her perspective on the ocean's unpredictable inhabitants. As Anna paddled out on her sleek turquoise surfboard, she couldn't help but feel a sense of exhilaration. The water was colder than usual, but the prospect of riding a clean, unbroken wave was too enticing to ignore. She had heard whispers of aggressive sea lions in the area, but dismissed the rumors, confident in her ability to navigate the ocean's currents. Suddenly, a massive shape emerged from the depths, slamming into the side of Anna's board with tremendous force. Taken by surprise, she struggled to regain her balance as she witnessed a massive bull-like sea lion propel itself into the air, its jaws wide open. In a split second, the animal latched onto Anna's leg, sinking its sharp teeth deep into her flesh. Panic surged through Anna's veins as the sea lion's powerful jaws tightened around her limb. She fought to keep her head above the water, kicking and flailing desperately to free herself from the creature's grasp. The pain was excruciating, and Anna could feel the warm blood trickling down her leg, mingling with the cold seawater. Anna's surfboard shattered as the sea lion thrashed about, leaving her no means of escape. She knew she had to act quickly to survive this vicious attack. Mustering all her strength, she began to punch and claw at the animal's face, desperately trying to pry its jaws open. The sea lion, driven by its territorial instincts, refused to let go. It continued to drag Anna deeper into the churning waves, its massive body twisting and turning as it sought to subdue its prey. Anna's lungs burned, and her vision began to blur, but she refused to give up, her survival instinct overriding the pain and exhaustion. With a final, desperate effort, Anna managed to land a solid blow to the sea lion's nose, causing the animal to release its grip. Gasping for air, she began to frantically swim towards the shore, her injured leg trailing behind her. The sea lion, still agitated, circled her, waiting for another opportunity to strike. Anna's muscles ached and her leg throbbed with every stroke, but she refused to let the sea lion catch her again. Summoning every ounce of her strength, she pushed forward, her eyes fixed on the distant shoreline. As she neared the beach, she could see the silhouettes of bystanders who had witnessed the attack and were rushing to her aid. With a final desperate lunge, Anna reached the shallow water, collapsing onto the sand as the concerned onlookers surrounded her. The paramedics arrived moments later, quickly assessing her injuries and rushing her to the nearest hospital. She recovered slowly, and after 2 weeks she had recovered fully. In the aftermath of the attack, Anna's life was forever changed. The deep bite wounds on her leg would take months to heal, and the psychological trauma would linger long after the physical scars had faded. But through it all, she remained grateful to have survived the encounter with the territorial sea lion, a reminder of the unpredictable and sometimes dangerous nature of the ocean's inhabitants. Under the blazing sun of Thailand, the turquoise waters of the Andaman Sea sparkled with a golden hue. Caroline, fresh off weeks of travel from bustling Bangkok to the serene beaches of Phuket, felt most at peace here among the crystal-clear waters of the Similan Islands. As an avid traveler and ocean enthusiast, she had always been captivated by the sea's mysteries and beauty. Snorkeling had become a favorite pastime, allowing her to explore a world vastly different from the one above. Anchored near a prime snorkeling spot, the boat was buzzing with anticipation. The local guide, experienced and calm, delivered the usual safety briefing. He spoke of the colorful corals, vibrant fish, and occasional sea turtles they might encounter, but also warned of the triggerfish, a species known for its aggressive and territorial behavior. Caroline, however, was too excited to focus on the exemplary details. Images of the underwater world she had seen in pictures fueled her enthusiasm. With her snorkel mask in place and fins strapped on, she slipped into the warm, inviting water. Immediately, she was surrounded by a stunning array of marine life. Schools of parrotfish and angelfish swam past, their scales sparkling in the sunlight that filtered through the surface. She floated effortlessly, letting the current guide her as she admired the vibrant ecosystem. While drifting, Caroline noticed a particularly striking fish. More significant than the rest, it sported vivid blues, greens, and yellows in bold patterns. It moved with deliberate, confident motions, patrolling its territory. Mesmerized by its beauty, Caroline swam closer, intrigued by the fish's distinct appearance. Although she vaguely remembered the guide's warning about triggerfish, her wonder overshadowed her caution. As she approached, the fish's behavior shifted. What had been a leisurely patrol turned rigid, its tiny eyes locked onto her. The fish began angling its body towards her, a sign that it felt threatened. Despite this, Caroline remained focused on the fish's intricate patterns, reaching out a hand to get a closer look. The triggerfish's initial warning, a rapid, jerky movement, went unnoticed by Caroline, who misinterpreted it as a curiosity. It wasn't until the fish made a sudden, aggressive charge that she realized the danger. The triggerfish darted toward her, its sharp teeth bared in a display of territorial aggression. Caroline's heart pounded as the fish closed the distance between them with alarming speed. She tried to pull her hand back, but it was too late. The triggerfish clamped down on her hand with surprising force, its sharp teeth sinking into her flesh. A sharp, searing pain shot through her, the salt water only intensifying the sensation as blood began to cloud the water around her. Shocked and disoriented, she instinctively jerked her hand away, her mind racing with the sudden realization that she was in danger. Panic set in as Caroline struggled to process what had just happened. The triggerfish, undeterred by her attempts to flee, continued to pursue her, its movements swift and relentless. She kicked her legs frantically, trying to put as much distance between herself and the aggressive fish as possible. But the pain in her hand was overwhelming, each pulse a reminder of the injury she had sustained. The blood in the water seemed to spur the fish on, its territorial instincts overriding any sense of fear it might have had. The boat, which had once seemed so close, now felt impossibly far away. Caroline's vision narrowed as adrenaline flooded her system, her focus entirely on escaping the relentless predator. She swam as fast as she could, her breath coming in ragged gasps through the snorkel. The weight of the situation pressed down on her, the realization that she was utterly alone in the vastness of the ocean, with no one immediately aware of the danger she was in. As she swam, her mind raced with thoughts of what could happen if she didn't make it back to the boat. The triggerfish was small, but its aggression and persistence were terrifying. She had heard stories of people being seriously injured by marine animals, and now she was living one of those nightmares. The idea of a more severe injury, a deep bite or worse, multiple attacks, flashed through her mind, fueling her desperation to escape. The water seemed to resist her efforts, and every stroke felt less effective than the last. Her muscles burned with the exertion, her lungs aching as she fought to maintain her pace. The triggerfish was still behind her, nipping at her fins and closing the gap whenever she slowed. Caroline's sense of time became distorted, every second stretching out as she battled her way back to the boat. The once peaceful and beautiful ocean had transformed into a hostile environment, its calm surface hiding the danger that lurked below. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Caroline saw the shadow of the boat looming above her. The sight filled her with a renewed sense of hope, but also a fresh wave of panic. She still had to reach it, and the triggerfish showed no signs of giving up. With a final burst of energy, she kicked harder, pushing herself toward the safety of the boat. Her injured hand throbbed with pain, but she ignored it, focusing only on the goal of getting out of the water. As she reached the side of the boat, Caroline grabbed onto the ladder with her uninjured hand, hauling herself up with all the strength she could muster. The fish made one last attempt to snap at her, its teeth grazing the bottom of her foot as she lifted it out of the water. She scrambled up the ladder, her heart pounding, and collapsed onto the deck, gasping for breath. The boat's crew, alerted by the commotion, rushed to her side, their faces filled with concern as they took in the sight of her bleeding hand. Lying on the deck, Caroline stared up at the sky, the adrenaline slowly draining from her body. The pain in her hand was now a dull, throbbing ache, but the reality of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. As the crew tended to her injury, cleaning the wound and wrapping it in a makeshift bandage, Caroline's thoughts were a whirlwind of emotions. There was relief, of course, that she had made it back to the boat without further harm. But there was also a deep sense of vulnerability, a realization that even in the most beautiful and seemingly serene places, danger could be lurking just beneath the surface. She had underestimated the ocean and its inhabitants, letting her curiosity and desire for adventure cloud her judgment. In the scorching summer of 2007, the Evans family decided to spend a relaxing day at a remote river in northern Australia. Known for its wild beauty and diverse wildlife, the area was a favorite retreat for locals. The river, winding through dense bushland, was surrounded by towering eucalyptus trees and thick undergrowth, offering a serene escape from the bustling city life. For Mark and Jane Evans, it was the perfect place to take their children, 15-year-old Jamie and his younger sister Lily, for a day of swimming and picnicking. The day started like any other. The sun was high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the landscape. The river's cool, clear water beckoned, and the family quickly set up their picnic area under the shade of a large tree. Jamie and Lily were eager to jump into the water, and after a quick reminder from their father to stay close to the shore, they waded in. The river was calm, and the children's laughter echoed through the trees as they splashed around near the bank. Mark, a seasoned outdoorsman, kept a watchful eye on his children, especially aware of the potential dangers that lurked in the waters of northern Australia. Saltwater crocodiles, or salties as they were commonly known, were a constant threat in this region. These apex predators were known for their stealth, power, and ability to remain completely still just beneath the water's surface, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Despite their fearsome reputation, many locals believed that with caution, the risks could be managed. As the afternoon wore on, Jamie, always the adventurous one, decided to swim a bit further out from the shore. The water was cool and refreshing, and the sense of freedom he felt was exhilarating. He didn't notice the subtle shift in the river's current or the way the water seemed to ripple ever so slightly behind him. Unbeknownst to Jamie, a large saltwater crocodile had been lurking just beneath the surface, its eyes fixed on the unsuspecting boy. The crocodile, a creature of immense strength and deadly precision, had been lying in wait, perfectly still and nearly invisible in the murky water. It had been watching Jamie's movements, waiting for the right moment to strike. When Jamie swam a little too far from the safety of the shore, the crocodile seized its opportunity. With terrifying speed, the crocodile lunged out of the water, its massive jaws clamping down on Jamie's torso. The force of the attack was so sudden and overwhelming that Jamie didn't even have time to scream. The crocodile's powerful jaws crushed down on his body, pulling him under the water in an instant. The serene river, Moments ago, a place of laughter and joy erupted into a scene of chaos and horror. Mark and Jane, who had been chatting near the picnic area, were alerted by the sound of splashing and the sudden absence of their son's laughter. When they turned towards the river, they were met with a sight that would haunt them forever. Jamie was gone, and in his place, the water churned violently, stained with blood. The realization hit them like a freight train. Jamie had been attacked. Without thinking, Mark grabbed the nearest object he could find, a large branch from a nearby tree, and sprinted towards the water. Jane's screams echoed in his ears, but his focus was entirely on saving his son. He waded into the river, the cold water soaking his clothes as he desperately searched for any sign of Jamie. The water was murky, making it difficult to see, but Mark refused to give up. He plunged the branch into the water repeatedly, aiming for the crocodile's head and snout, the only vulnerable parts of the beast. The crocodile, agitated by the sudden attack, thrashed wildly, dragging Jamie deeper into the water. But Mark, fueled by sheer adrenaline and the primal instinct to protect his child, kept fighting. He struck the crocodile again and again, each blow more desperate than the last. Finally, the crocodile, overwhelmed by the relentless assault, loosened its grip just enough for Mark to grab hold of Jamie and pull him free. With a final burst of strength, Mark hauled his son out of the water and onto the riverbank. Jamie was barely conscious, his body limp and his skin cold to the touch. He was bleeding heavily from deep gashes in his torso, but he was alive. Mark and Jane quickly wrapped him in towels, applying pressure to the wounds and trying to keep him awake. They knew they were far from medical help, but they couldn't afford to panic. As they rushed Jamie to the nearest hospital, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. The attack had been swift and brutal, a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked in the wilds of northern Australia. The river, once a place of fun and relaxation, had become a battleground between man and nature. Jamie had come within moments of death, and the experience left the entire family shaken to their core. During the summer of 2005, Jake Anderson moved to his favorite underwater wonderland, the fine kelp forests of Monterey, California. The 32-year-old marine biologist had spent hundreds of hours studying the vast life of the sea, but had never seen one of the most elusive and captivating creatures of the deep, the giant Pacific octopus. As Jake drifted down into the thick kelp canopy, his mind was racing about how he would document this complex ecosystem. He had heard rumors of enormous octopuses hovering in the dark, although he hadn't seen one with his naked eyes. Then, as he swam through an exceptionally thick patch of kelp, he felt a sudden sharp tug on his ankle. Instinctively, Jake looked down to see a giant tentacle wrapped around his leg, pulling him deeper into the forest. His heart began racing as he realized he was in the grip of a mighty octopus. In only moments, the 8 strong limbs of the creature wrapped around his leg, and Jake could feel a beak, for tearing open the shells of crabs and clams close to his flesh. Panic set in as he struggled to free himself. He shook his leg, trying to break the creature's grip, but the octopus held tight. Jake knew he had to think fast. He was running out of oxygen. Jake went for his dive knife, but every move was challenging in the thick kelp forest. As the octopus pulled him deeper, Jake thought quickly about escaping this difficult situation. He had never fathomed a time when his fascination with the marine world would have him in such immediate danger. Fueled with adrenaline, the determination to survive burned, but the strength in those octopus arms was immense. His hand struck a large boulder on the sea floor, which he clutched firmly and swung against the octopus's head. The blow connected with a dull thud, and for just a second the octopus broke its hold. Jake used that second to kick his leg free, but then the octopus regained its senses and came at him once again. Knowing he was running out of time, Jake desperately swam toward the surface, his strokes retarded by the heavy kelp. He was being pursued by the octopus with long tentacles reaching out, trying to snare back its prey. Jake could feel the suction cups of the creature rake across his skin, and he knew he needed to make one last push to get away. As he broke through the surface, Jake gasped for air, his lungs on fire from the effort. He looked around until he saw the octopus's tentacles slipping beneath the waves, an outstanding example of tenacity and vigor in a creature. Shaken by the experience, he swam back toward shore with all possible speed, his mind reeling from the narrow escape from death. Once ashore, Jake related this harrowing incident to his colleagues at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, where he worked as a marine biologist. The story spread all around the public imagination, captivated by the account of that elusive nature, the giant Pacific octopus. The experience haunted him. He had always known how heavy and unpredictable the ocean's punch could be, but this encounter had brought him face to face with a giant Pacific octopus. He finally decided to continue his research to learn more about such wonderful creatures and their location in the balance of these sensitive ecosystems of the kelp forests. Jake's brush with the giant Pacific octopus had left an indelible mark on his psyche. As he lay in bed that night, the memory of the creature's tentacles coiling around his leg replaying vividly in his mind, he couldn't help but feel a profound sense of respect and wonder. The ocean, it seemed, was filled with wonders yet to be discovered, and Jake knew that this harrowing encounter would forever shape his future as a marine biologist. With a renewed passion and determination, he resolved to continue his research, determined to unravel the mysteries of the giant Pacific octopus and the remarkable ecosystem it called home. For Jake, the kelp forests of Monterey would forever hold a special and slightly ominous place in his heart. Sandra thrived on pushing boundaries, seeking out extreme experiences from rock climbing without harnesses in the Canadian Rockies to skydiving over the Utah deserts. The thrill that paralyzed others fueled her, and in South Africa, the opportunity for the ultimate adrenaline rush presented itself. Cage diving with great white sharks. Gansbaai, known as the significant white shark capital, was her destination. The town's serene coastline belied the danger lurking beneath the surface. Sandra, eager for the encounter, arrived at the dive center early. She had researched everything about great whites, hunting patterns, bite strength, and the shape of their teeth. Despite understanding the risks, she was drawn to the rare chance of facing these apex predators up close. The day dawned clear, with the sun casting a golden glow over the ocean. Sandra's excitement was palpable as she prepared for the dive. The seasoned dive operators, their weathered faces speaking to their extensive experience, briefed the group on safety protocols and cage procedures. Sandra, calm and composed, was ready for the thrill. The boat ride was smooth, and as they neared the dive site, the operators began chumming the water with fish guts and blood to attract the sharks. The overpowering stench was secondary to Sandra's anticipation. Her eyes scanned the water eagerly for any sign of movement. When the first fin appeared, a hush fell over the boat. The massive great white, its dorsal fin cutting through the water with deliberate grace, elicited awe and fear from the group. Sandra's heart raced with excitement. This was the moment she had been waiting for. One by one, the divers entered the cage, a robust structure of reinforced steel. Sandra waited until last, savoring the anticipation. After checking her equipment, she stepped into the cage, the cold water a jolt to her senses. She descended, the world above replaced by a silent blue expanse. Suspended in the water, Sandra took her position at the front of the cage, eyes alert and breathing steady. The ocean's vastness stretched out before her, visibility limited but enough to catch sight of the approaching sharks. As promised, the sharks came. The first was a female over 15 feet long. Her sleek, powerful body glided toward the cage with an almost lazy grace. Sandra felt a thrill as the great white approached, its massive head turning slightly as it passed by. Seeing the shark up close with its rows of razor-sharp teeth was a stark contrast to the documentaries she had watched. This was the moment of confrontation she had longed for, an intimate encounter with a creature that epitomized raw, primal power. The shark circled the cage, drawn by the scent of the chum in the water. Sandra's pulse quickened. The sheer size of the creature was overwhelming. The other divers were still, their eyes wide as they took in the sight. But then the familiar rush of adrenaline kicked in, and with it came the need to push the boundaries. Sandra's eyes narrowed as she watched the shark make another pass. It was so close now, just inches away from the bars. She could see the fine details of a life spent at the top of the food chain. Without thinking, she leaned forward, her face pressing against the cold metal bars. The shark turned, its dark eyes locking with hers for a brief moment. The rational part of her brain, the part that recognized the danger, told her to pull back, to stay within the safety of the cage. But that part of her was quickly silenced by the thrill of the moment. With a reckless grin, Sandra extended her hand, fingertips brushing the water just beyond the cage's bars. The great white shark hovered close, its massive head nearly within reach. The other divers held their breath, eyes darting nervously between Sandra and the looming predator. Even the dive operators above sensed impending danger, but Sandra was focused solely on the thrill of touching the shark. The idea of claiming such a feat as her own was intoxicating, a story to boast about among fellow thrill-seekers. The shark's body brushed against the cage, causing it to shudder under the force. Adrenaline surged through Sandra as she leaned further out, her head and shoulders now outside the cage, fingers stretching toward the shark. The water was clear, and every detail of the shark's movement was visible. Sandra's heart raced as she imagined the texture of the shark's skin beneath her fingertips. In an instant, the situation changed. The shark, reacting to Sandra's movement, struck with terrifying speed. Its jaws snapped open, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. The impact with the cage was jarring, metal grinding against the shark's teeth as it shook the entire structure. The cage lurched violently, and Sandra was thrown backward, narrowly escaping the shark's snapping jaws. Water exploded around her and the cage swayed as the shark battered it. The chaos was overwhelming, Sandra's heart pounding as she realized the danger she had narrowly avoided. She had been inches away from becoming another cautionary tale. After its furious assault, the shark retreated into the depths, leaving behind only scattered bubbles and a cage bearing the marks of its fury. The water slowly calmed, the once exciting thrill replaced by a chilling realization. Sandra felt a cold shiver as she processed how recklessly she had flirted with danger. The other divers stared at her, shocked, while the dive operators quickly began pulling her up. The tone of the day shifted from excitement to something far more somber. As Sandra was hoisted from the water, the reality of her close call hit hard. The cage rattled on the boat, a harsh reminder of how close she had come to disaster. Shaky and still buzzing with adrenaline, Sandra climbed out, her mind replaying the moment of terror. The shark's jaws, so close to her hand, were now etched into her memory. Sitting on the deck, Sandra felt the enormity of her near miss settle in. The vast, beautiful ocean had nearly claimed her, leaving Sandra with a profound lesson in the dangers of recklessness. It was a bright and sunny morning in the summer of 2009. The waves at Waikoloa Beach on the Big Island of Hawaii were perfect. Consistent swells rolling in, crystal clear water glistening under the sun. The beach was a favorite among locals and tourists alike, known for its stunning views and ideal surfing conditions. Among the surfers that day was 26-year-old Jenna Riley, a professional surfer who had spent most of her life chasing waves around the world. Hawaii was one of her favorite spots, a place where the ocean felt like home. Jenna had arrived early that morning, eager to catch the best waves before the beach became crowded. She had a few successful rides, the waves carrying her effortlessly to shore. The rhythm of the ocean, the thrill of the surf. It was all familiar, comforting. After riding a particularly exhilarating wave, Jenna decided to paddle out again, further than she had before, hoping to catch one of the larger sets forming on the horizon. As she paddled, the water around her was calm, almost serene. But beneath the surface, something was lurking. The waters of Hawaii, while beautiful, were also home to some of the ocean's most formidable predators. Among them, the tiger shark was one of the most feared. These sharks, known for their size and aggression, were not uncommon in Hawaiian waters, but attacks were rare enough that most surfers didn't think twice about them. Jenna, lost in her thoughts and the anticipation of the next wave, didn't notice the dark shape moving swiftly beneath her. The tiger shark, a massive creature with a reputation for unpredictable behavior, had spotted Jenna's silhouette from below. To the shark, her movement on the surfboard resembled that of a wounded seal, a common prey. Without warning, the shark made its move. Before Jenna could react, the shark surged upward, breaking the surface with terrifying force. Its powerful jaws clamped down on her leg, the impact so intense that it nearly knocked her off her board. Pain shot through her body as the shark's teeth sliced through flesh and muscle, the water around her instantly turning red. Jenna screamed in agony, the sound lost in the vastness of the ocean, her mind struggling to process the sudden brutal attack. The tiger shark, driven by instinct, began to thrash, trying to drag Jenna off the board and into deeper water. The sheer power of the animal was overwhelming, and for a moment, it seemed like the ocean itself was trying to pull her under. But Jenna's survival instincts kicked in. Despite the excruciating pain, she clung to her surfboard, using it as a shield to keep the shark at bay. Every movement was a fight for survival, every second a battle against the predator that had turned her day of surfing into a nightmare. Jenna's efforts to fend off the shark were frantic but determined. She kicked at the shark's snout with her free leg, desperately trying to keep it from getting a stronger grip. The water churned violently as the shark continued its assault, but Jenna refused to give up. She knew that if she let go, if she allowed herself to be pulled under, it would all be over. Nearby, other surfers had seen the commotion. Realizing the danger, they paddled towards Jenna as quickly as they could, fear gripping their hearts. They knew time was of the essence. The shark was relentless, but so was Jenna. With every ounce of strength she had left, she continued to fight, even as her leg throbbed with pain and her vision blurred from the blood loss. Finally, just as Jenna felt her strength waning, help arrived. Two surfers reached her side, one of them striking the shark with his surfboard, causing it to release its grip momentarily. The others pulled Jenna onto their boards, the water still swirling with blood. They paddled furiously towards the shore, the adrenaline driving them forward, even as the shark circled one last time before disappearing into the depths. By the time they reached the beach, Jenna was barely conscious, her leg a mangled mess of torn flesh and bone. But she was alive. The attack had been brutal, a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked beneath the waves, even in a place as seemingly idyllic as Hawaii. As Jenna was airlifted to the hospital, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. She had come face to face with one of the ocean's deadliest predators, and had lived to tell the tale. It was a bright, sunny afternoon in early December 2001 when the Mason family decided to spend a day at a beautiful beach near Gansbaai, South Africa. The beach, known for its stunning views and occasional dolphin sightings, was a popular spot for both locals and tourists. For 7-year-old Tommy Mason, the chance to see dolphins in the wild was the highlight of the trip. He had always been fascinated by marine life, and his parents, Peter and Sarah, were excited to share this experience with him. As the family arrived at the beach, the atmosphere was lively. People were swimming, playing in the sand, and enjoying the warm weather. The waves lapped gently at the shore, and the ocean stretched out in a vast expanse of blue. The Masons set up their spot near the water, laying out towels and unpacking a picnic. Tommy, full of energy and excitement, immediately began scanning the horizon for any sign of dolphins. He had seen dolphins in aquariums before, but the thought of seeing them in their natural habitat was something else entirely. As the afternoon wore on, Tommy played in the shallow water, building sandcastles and occasionally glancing out to sea, hoping to catch a glimpse of a dorsal fin. It wasn't long before Tommy's patience was rewarded. Out in the distance, he saw a fin break the surface of the water. His heart skipped a beat as he pointed excitedly towards it. Peter and Sarah looked up, following Tommy's gaze. They saw the fin, not too far from where the waves gently kissed the shore. It was moving slowly, lazily, as if drifting closer to the beach. Tommy, unable to contain his excitement, started wading into the water, his small feet splashing as he moved towards the fin. In his young mind, the fin belonged to a friendly dolphin, just like the ones he had seen in books and on television. But as he moved deeper into the water, the fin began to grow larger, and the shape beneath it more defined. The water around the fin darkened, and the playful image of a dolphin began to blur into something else, something far more dangerous. What Tommy didn't know, and what his parents were about to realize, was that this was no dolphin. It was a juvenile great white shark drawn to the shallow waters by the scent of fish and seals. Juvenile great whites, though smaller than their adult counterparts, were still formidable predators, and this one, curious and inexperienced, was about to make a terrifying mistake. As Tommy moved closer, calling out in hopes of getting the dolphin's attention, the shark began to circle. Its sleek body moved with the natural grace of a predator, but to Tommy, it seemed like the playful dance of a friendly creature. The shark, still learning how to hunt, was drawn to the boys' splashing. mistaking it for the erratic movements of prey. Back on shore, Peter and Sarah watched their son with growing unease. Something about the fin seemed off. Its shape was more angular, and its movements were more calculated. The realization hit Sarah first, a sudden wave of dread washing over her. She called him to get out, her voice filled with panic. Peter was already on his feet, running towards the water's edge, but he knew he was too far to reach his son in time. As Tommy continued wading deeper into the water, oblivious to the danger he was in, the shark moved closer, its curiosity turning into a predatory focus. The boy's small frame and playful splashes were too much for the shark to ignore. The great white, still inexperienced but driven by instinct, decided to investigate further. The water around Tommy began to ripple as the shark circled him, its dorsal fin cutting through the surface just a few feet away. By now, Tommy could see the full size of the creature beneath the waves, and the realization that this was no dolphin finally struck him. Fear gripped his heart as he saw the massive shape below him, but before he could react, the shark closed in. Back on the shore, Peter was desperately trying to reach his son, his legs pumping through the water as fast as they could. Sarah's screams echoed in his ears, but all he could focus on was the sight of his son standing frozen in the water, just inches away from the shark. In a split second, the shark made its move. It darted forward, its jaws open, ready to bite down on what it thought was easy prey. But just as it was about to strike, a lifeguard who had been watching the scene unfold from a distance sprang into action. He grabbed a rescue board and paddled furiously towards Tommy, adrenaline surging through his veins. The shark's fin cut through the water, coming closer and closer. Tommy was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or cry out. But just as the shark was within striking distance, the lifeguard reached him, pulling him onto the rescue board with a swift, practiced motion. The shark, startled by the sudden commotion and the lifeguard's aggressive movements, veered off course. Its powerful body brushed against the board, and for a moment it seemed like it might still attack. But the lifeguard, using his experience and training, kept the board between the shark and the boy, paddling back towards the shore with all his strength. Peter finally reached them as they neared the shallow water, grabbing his son and helping the lifeguard pull the board to safety. The shark, confused and perhaps realizing its mistake, swam off into deeper waters, its shadow fading into the blue. On the beach, Sarah ran to meet them, tears streaming down her face as she wrapped her arms around Tommy. The boy, still in shock, clung to his mother, his small body trembling. The beach, once filled with the sounds of laughter and waves, was now silent, the weight of what had nearly happened sinking in. Tommy was safe, but the close encounter had shaken everyone. The beachgoers who had watched from a distance now gathered, whispering about the near tragedy they had just witnessed. The lifeguard, his heart still pounding, stood with the family, assuring them that the danger had passed.